This is one of those rare occasions where a dystopia warning is absolutely not applicable. You know, on account of the Conservatives' absolutely humiliatingly beautiful defeat in the local elections. Safe to say it was a good night. Well, unless you're a Tory. Now, I've not made a video about this yet because I've been a bit burnt out, yeah. Because like everyone else, I'm waiting for a general election to be called, but our democratic processes are being hijacked by a billionaire borrower that's squatting inside number 10, who is about as popular as a corpse in a lift, who is probably waiting for a few more contracts for his father-in-law's multi-billion-pound business Infosys, you know, from which his wife earns a passive income of, what, 12 million a year? A guy that, when faced with the worst results for the Conservative Party in an election in over 40 years...
How do you feel when you lose?
Sorry?
How do you feel when you lose?
...started spinning a yarn about there being a hung parliament at the next general election, which is absolute nonsense. Didn't stop news outlets publishing it like it's fact. I've got dyscalculia, and even I know that trying to predict national results on local election results in England is batshit. But it just goes to show what any party that's not Tory is up against from the media, particularly the opposition. And if you're wondering why I call Rishi Sunak the billionaire borrower, well, it's pretty clear, isn't it? Not only does he borrow loads of money, he's also fucking tiny. Safe to say the results were sexy, weren't they? The Tories put in third place behind the Lib Dems, which is exactly where we intend to put them in a general election. Huge respect to everybody that went out and tactically voted, because tactical voting had a huge impact on the outcome. John Curtis has noted that, as have a number of journalists. A few of my favourite moments? Well, there's so many to choose from. I particularly enjoyed John Ashworth roasting Jonathan Gullis.
We've only had a few results in, to be fair. But
that's the case you're making.
Yeah, but that's quite a swing, isn't it? I mean, you'd be toast if there was a 16% swing to Labour, wouldn't you?
Let's show you it again, a swing.
That was beautiful. I enjoyed watching Ben Bradley lose. Yeah. He was standing in the East Midlands mayoral contest and was beaten by Labour. Big ups to Claire Ward for making him look incredibly sad. Rest in peace, the drywall in that particular, probably underfunded community centre. Another favourite also happened in the Midlands. The Wealdstone Raider lost the mayoral contest. Only joking, it was Andy Street. They're literally the same person. You want some? Votes? Tough. Another happy moment was the Reform Party massively helping us in terms of losing Conservative seats. Reform won 2 councillors in Havant, but one thing they haven't managed is hiding their racism from their social media accounts. Yeah, they're revealed to have praised Tommy Robinson, calling him a brave man, and another called London a third world cesspit and said that there's far too many Muslims. But as Richard Tice so often says, they're definitely not far right, are they? No. I mean, I for one am absolutely shocked. Yeah, you saw that coming. We want our country back, says barely sentient spud Lee Anderson. Well, I think you'll find that the country voted to take our country back from the racists. There was one area, that stood out. Dan Swords made one of the very few Conservative gains in Harlow. Of course it'd be Essex, wouldn't it? He really is a quite terrifying creature. He has the head of a 5-year-old and the body and the voice of a grown man. He said that Harlow bucked the trend, the trend of sense and sanity. But how did they win that? By unsuspending a councillor that was facing investigation for Islamophobia. Another happy moment was York and North Yorkshire, Sunak's constituency, now being run by a Labour mayor. This was an extraordinary night for Labour, but you would not have thought it from watching the BBC coverage or even the Sky coverage. In the early hours, I shared this image of Laura Kunsberg watching the results in Plymouth, which turned out to be pretty massively memed in the days that followed, right? And it's time to bring our focus on the absolutely shocking bias of Kunsberg and the BBC. It shouldn't be a running joke that certain political journalists are so shockingly biased in favour of the Conservative government that people say, oh, it's almost as if they're working for them. It affirms that the relationship between the BBC and the Tories is undemocratic, dysfunctional, but also about mutual survival. You know, the BBC not wanting to upset ministers and risk losing their funding, and the government ensuring that they're favoured by the public and they have sympathetic coverage. The BBC couldn't even list the council seats without providing a caveat for the Conservative losses. They're supposed to be an independent, impartial broadcaster, and they prefaced information with the Conservatives were always likely to lose councillors at this election, and they mentioned the vaccine rollout, something that Laura Kuenssberg has also mentioned. This is a clip of her prior to the government announcing their budget, in which she repeats party lines and lies.
Wednesday might not be a vintage day. Maybe there won't be much fairy dust because the country's balance sheet was battered by COVID and then the conflict in Ukraine. So it will not be a moment when the Chancellor will have many tasty morsels to tempt you with.
At the time, Tory MPs and ministers were working overtime to deflect with these mistruths from their catastrophic failures. Energy prices were rocketing prior to Russia invading Ukraine. Our NHS was in collapse before the pandemic. Billions was lost to fraud during COVID, much of it pocketed by Tory donors and friends of the Conservative Party. Yet here we have a so-called BBC journalist repeating Tory lies and spin on her flagship prime-time Sunday morning political programme. Chris Mason, who took over from Laura Kuenssberg, isn't much better. You see, much like Laura, he repeats uncritically rumours and snippets from inside the heart of government. Now, this is how scoop culture has worked for some time. But the issue is how it's framed as fact without any caveats or even any deeper analysis. Kuenssberg, on her public Twitter, was repeating a lie that the mayoral contest between Sadiq Khan and Susan Hall was close. Not only was this false, but seeding something like that could lead to a false sense of credibility to anyone that wants to claim that the outcome was undemocratic or thrown or corrupted in some way. The lead up to this local election was shocking, and that's why it's taken me a little while to make some content about it, because I was burnt out absorbing the shocking levels of Islamophobia, racism, and the horrific rhetoric pumped out directly from the heart of government, which sought to spread fear amongst people suffering with mental health issues, suffering with disability, generally suffering because of this Conservative government. Thousands and thousands of bots employed to flood social media with the most shocking, open racism. They're not even trying to hide it. It was disgusting, including severe threats towards Sadiq Khan before and after his win. Now, I'm massively thankful that the tactical vote campaign worked. It restored my faith in Britain again, frankly. Because had the Tories won on this horrific campaign, they'd have done exactly what they did with the Ulez Con win in Uxbridge and Ruislip, Johnson's old seat, where they narrowly won a by-election. They would have applied this nationally at the general election. Now, I want to reassure people that might be worried about the horrific policy that's being touted by Sunak and his government of scumbags. It's never going to come to fruition. What they're trying to do is they're trying to crush the most vulnerable people, blame them for everything and send a signal to their rich voters. But the effect that it's having on people when the government has catastrophically destroyed our NHS for 14 years must be immense. But they're the ones responsible for it. They're never going to implement it. And mark my words, we're going to get them out at the general election. These were the results in the 2022 locals. These were the results in the 2023 local elections. And these were the results in the 2024 local elections. Far from predicting a hung parliament, the locals are actually in line with current voting intention for a general election. We're going to be back and we're going to be bigger at the general. It's going to look a little bit more like this than what that child in a Prada suit and his friends in the media are trying to make you believe. In short, the Tories are fucked, mate.